the question I have developed upon suggestion by Yanir is how can contemporary societies deal with diversity? And this is, of course, not only a Western problem, but across the world, everywhere, basically, we see some growing resistance to diversity. And most societies seem to have reached what they perceive as the limit of the diversity they are willing to accommodate or maybe able to accommodate. But diversity, as I mean it, should be understood broadly. So, what I mean are ethnic and national identities and religious differences, migration, gender, lifestyles, and so on, but also territorial diversity. So federalism, regionalism, multi-level governance, call it as you want. And even in constitutional systems where federalism and decentralization used to be, long-term trends. Now we are witnessing some attention to more centralization. But so there is a resistance against diversity, both in ethnocultural terms and also in territorial terms. But despite all this strong resistance, diversity is not diminishing. Actually, the contrary is true because migration continues, societies get more interconnected, identities are more and more plural, individual life choices are more diverse, etc. So what has changed is not diversity itself, but the way it is politically addressed. And instead of accompanying and governing diversity, the opposition to diversity has become louder. It is more confrontational, sometimes even violent. And while anti-diversity policies are politically very successful, they do not really succeed in reducing diversity. So they change the political narrative, but not the social reality. So if that's the background, and I think it's common knowledge, we all witness that. I would like to present two questions for further discussion, and then in the further discussion for examples or cases upon which we can build. So the first question for this introduction is why are anti-diversity policies so politically successful despite the fact that they are not successful? So they do not deliver. So they are politically successful, but they don't deliver. And the second question is what can be done, of course, to address diversity in a more constructive and sustainable way. Point number one. So I suspect that the answer is partly anthropological. Certainly there are people in the crowd who can develop that further and correct me, but human beings, of course, have limits in dealing with complexity, all sort of complexity, right? Those of us who are not good at mathematics, they go up to a certain limit and then they don't understand it any longer, right? And the same goes for other sorts of complexities. When I deal with computers, and this video is perhaps an example of that, I also reach my limits and I cannot go beyond that. And then I even get angry because, I wanted to do something. And then the computer tells me, no, you have to do this and then to do that. And you have to think like the machine in order to be able to do what you were supposed to do. And then you want to throw the computer from your window, right? So the appearance of simplicity sells well. But of course, if you're a computer scientist, you appreciate this growing degree of complexity. And the same thing happens with societies. As the number of identities, interests, social interactions of any kind increases, then the promise of simplicity becomes politically irresistible, right? It's can also apply to artificial intelligence. It looks simple, but the real power belongs to those who control it, right? So in a way, it is a vicious circle. So that's the reason why to deal with complex phenomena, you need specialists, right? And also specialists with societal complexity. But the work of the surgeon, of the plumber, or of the IT specialist are not debated publicly. But when you have to fix societies, then society must be involved. And this makes everything much more complex. So there is politics, and politics works according to logics that are different from rationality, scientific rationality. I will be making some examples in the discussion later on. So constitutional lawyers normally operate as engineers who are told to build a bridge that statically do not hold, right? And must try to make it stand in one way or another. So this leads to the second question: what or should or could be done? Traditionally, minority groups have been conceived as um, groups of people who receive rights granted by a majority. And both majorities and minorities are imagined as clearly identifiable groups. So the rights of minorities have been framed in terms of homogeneous groups that are majorities, allowing some rights to other homogeneous groups, the minorities, and what groups? Those whose claims are at some point successful, right? Now, think of the rights of women. They were completely neglected until recently. Then the group has been established, created, became politically identifiable. The claims were successful. Fair enough, accepted, groups giving rights to other homogeneous groups. But this is the Columbus egg. It does not really challenge the idea of societies being owned by groups, which is the real ultimate problem in my view. It does not challenge the majority principle that supports this approach of collective property about the territory and then conceding rights to other groups and peoples. Diversity should not be understood as a temporary problem, something that sooner or later will be resolved. And it will be resolved within the framework of this homogeneity thinking, but should be understood as a permanent characteristic of contemporary societies. So what should be done is to look at integration of societies and not integration of groups into societies. So that was the initial input I wanted to offer, and then I'll be glad to discuss this further and to see especially a few examples and discuss them with you.